Hey guys, Spirit of the Lie here. There's a new DLC for Age of Mythology coming out tomorrow, September 30th, which brings us the Japanese as a brand new pantheon. In this jam-packed video, we'll take a look at their unique mechanics, buildings, human, myth, and hero units, as well as their god powers. While there is a quick tutorial for the Japanese in-game, this will be a much more fleshed out version, so you can really hit the ground running. With that, we'll start with the Japanese favor generation with Mikos. These gals are hero units you can train at the town center, and you also start with one that you can use both as a scout and as a bit of an anti-myth unit with some bonus damage against those, as well as grabbing some early relics, plus they can also heal other units, so they're very multifunctional. But for most of the game, their primary role is as your source of favor. They build and work a unique building called a shrine, which are pretty cheap at just 75 wood, and when being worked by a Miko, generate favor depending on how many natural resources are around them, sort of calling back to how shrines worked in Age of Empires 3. This terribly placed one in the middle of nowhere generates 0.03 favor per second, while a better placed one along woodline not just converts the trees into cherry trees, but also has a license to kill with 0.007 favor per second, meaning you get way more favor over time. To quickly show a range of examples, perfectly nestled in the trees, you can get up to 0.11 per second, about 50% more than putting one along a boring old tree line, though other resources work too, especially gold, either combined with a tree line or if you have piles on their own, here giving up to 0.15 favor per second in this example. Wild animals like chicken and boar also contribute a bit, though herdable animals like goats don't. A few things to add are you can't use multiple of these on the same resource, so you want to avoid any overlap. And also, as you harvest a resource, the favor generated by the Miko goes down. So you essentially maintain your high favor rate by preserving nature, which is a unique design choice. Intuitively, it seems like grabbing a woodline that also captures a gold pile in range is a good way to go early on, then placing more hidden around the map as you start to ramp up your myth unit production. Notice the amount of resources in anything they touch actually goes up as well, so shrines actually give you some resource benefit in the long run if you decide to grab those natural resources later. In the very late game, there's also a tech for all your shrines to slowly grow new trees around themselves, meaning older shrines you've stripped the resources out from under can become more useful again later. Their other brand new mechanic is called Bushido, which makes your creatures bigger if they block or are blocked. Just kidding, that's a different game entirely, and in Age of Mythology, Bushido is instead a global leveling system that gives you benefits varying a bit depending on which god you pick. Units at the dojo building generate Bushido XP both passively and even more when in combat. As you get XP from one of a few different ways, your Bushido levels up, giving you automatic upgrades to your military units, plus a secondary effect for each major god. The unit upgrade is interesting, as Japanese have a somewhat streamlined upgrade system, where one upgrade at a military building improves all of their units at that building at once, unlike, say, Norse, who have to upgrade each unit line individually. The way this could look in practice is you run around with your samurai taking fights and leveling up your Bushido to level 2 or 3. So then if you tech into archers or cavalry later, you'll find they're already at tier 2 or 3 just automatically, making those transitions feel extra smooth. On the other hand, there's a bit of a trade-off in whether you want to pay for upgraded units earlier or wait for Bushido to do it for you later for free. Though something to be aware of is as you get closer to leveling up, the cost of those upgrades also drops if you do want to pay for them outright. Either way, these secondary benefits from each god make leveling up useful even without the free unit upgrades. Speaking of which though, let's take a quick look at the three major gods. The first is Amaterasu, who leans into Samurai in particular. She gives you some passive gold, a bunch of extra Bushido XP from Samurai, more favor generation from shrines, and lets your Samurai automatically heal both in and outside of combat, while her archaic age power is Solar Shield, letting a single unit become invincible for 15 seconds and fully healing while doing that. If you like playing with tanky Samurai as your core unit, she's a great choice to synergize with that. The second major god is Tsukuyomi, who is focused more on the ninjas in cavalry. He gives those units a boost through his Bushido and lets you generate XP by researching any technology, as well as advancing 25% faster, plus giving you the odd free scout unit we'll talk about a bit later called the Kitsune. His god power is New Moon, which lets you research all available techs at a given building nearly instantly for free. This only includes the current level of tech shown, not subsequent ones, so you can't just power through all your armory techs back to back in Mythic Age, but seems pretty useful at a castle or temple to pick up a lot of techs quickly, so there's a few potential use cases with good planning. The third major god is Susanoo, and he's all about giving you as many myth units and god powers as possible. He gives you free favor per Bushido leveling up, and all his myth units generate more XP instead of just dojo units. He also makes god powers cheaper and special abilities recharge faster, with many myth units having those kinds of abilities. His unique power is Kasunagi, which damages and sends units flying in a small area. It seems like something that would be good for disrupting archers in the back during an early fight, for example, and while it doesn't seem that strong, it could swing the first significant fight of the game. Next though, let's bring things back to Earth and quickly touch on the Japanese buildings and core units. Japanese eco-buildings are pretty straightforward, with the watermill used as a drop-off point for both wood and food, and the mining camp for gold. The armory is also pretty standard, and nothing surprising so far. For military buildings, you then have three options, each with slightly different roles. The first is the guardhouse, which has an anti-cavalry and anti-infantry unit, along with a ranged hero, which is basically an archer plus a bonus against myth units. It's not quite an archery range, as you have the anti-cavalry spear-like equivalent here, but you can think of it as your source of lower-tier counter units. That said, don't sleep on the spearman's triple damage to cavalry, or the ranged hero's 8 times multiplier against myth units. Contrasting with that, the next building is the dojo, which trains your more expensive but higher-tier units. The samurai is especially anti-infantry, and the shinobi has a large bonus against ranged units, along with a ranged attack. Plus, you have a samurai hero version available at this building, adding in its own large multiplier against myth units again. In addition to being an infantry that counters archers, shinobi also have a unique ability after attack to become temporarily invisible. Note that the dojo units give you passive XP generation, which is quadrupled for the major god Amaterasu, so using these over time will automatically upgrade themselves and any other units you want to surround them with. The third building is the stable, with your melee anti-archer cavalry, a horse archer, and a mounted hero called the daimyo. Notice 3 of your heroes come from your military buildings, alongside similar human unit equivalents, and you can make as many of each of these as you want, housing space permitting. 2 of them are 4 housing space each, so that adds up quickly, but in general they're still fairly easy to mix into your armies on the fly. The next building is the castle, where you train an anti-unit siege weapon, similar to a scorpion in Age of Empires 2, along with another hero called the Omnioji. This guy is actually a total boss, firing magic with splash damage, can heal allies, and generally hits really hard against both buildings and myth units. The fact they can also heal each other makes it feel like you're adding Shadowheart and Gale to your party at once. They're anti-myth unit, anti-building, and just a great support unit all around. The last building is the temple, which of course has your myth units and their corresponding upgrades, depending on which minor gods you pick up. And in fact, let's just take a look at all the myth units now to give you a bit of familiarity with each and what they offer. You actually get the first myth unit in the Archaic Age, called the Kitsune. These work as early scouts, and are pretty cheap, at least food-wise, as well as fast. They have a unique ability to speed up your nearby units by 5%, with a tech that you can research to make the stack with 2 of them for 10% more speed on your nearby units. The fact the cavalry-focused major god gets one of these for free each time they age up implies the devs definitely want to encourage you mixing these into your armies. Moving on to the classical age myth units, the first is the Kama Itachi, which are deadly weasels of unusual size with blades for hands. They cost food plus favor, and have relatively low armor, meaning they'll struggle against any higher tier enemy units, but are your fastest classical age myth unit, making them good at applying some early pressure. They also have a unique ability to whirl around and apply a damage trickle to any unit caught up in that, so if you like speed and are up against a lot of weak enemy units, then they're a pretty solid choice. The next myth unit are the Spider Ladies, called Jurogumo. Instead of food, they cost gold and favor, being slower but tankier with solid hack and pierce armor, so they're able to hold up against higher tier units for longer than the weasels. Their special ability is they grab a human unit, dealing a bunch of damage to it, and then send it flying. Overall, they're just a solid, well-rounded early game myth unit. The third option in the classical age is the Wanyudo, featuring a face that only a mother could love. They cost wood and favor, having high pierce and good crush damage to take out buildings, but very low hack armor, so they're not great in melee. Their special ability is shooting fire that deals sustained damage, and while they're not necessarily great in the front lines, they work well as a nice support unit against mass enemies, buildings, or just tanking arrows. Moving up to the heroic age, the first of the myth units is Tengu. They're very quick and can fly, with pretty solid stats all around, while their special ability lets them leap at targets, pumping themselves up and getting past any obstacles. Jumping past melee units to hit squishier targets in the back is exactly the sort of situation they excel at, though they're just all around solid. The next myth unit are the super slow but beefy Oni. These are 300 food and 20 favor each, so pretty expensive, but have over 1000 HP and a very slow to recharge but powerful attack. They pump themselves up before a fight as well, doubling their attack speed and gaining 10% extra attack, but lose 10% of their armor for a limited amount of time. Whether it's tanking arrows, grinding down melee units, or destroying buildings, these guys give you some serious mid-game muscle, and just looking at their faces, you can really tell they enjoy the work they do. Finally, the third Heroic Age myth unit is the Raiju. As you can tell, these are some lightning wolves, with great speed and an area electrifying attack that sends units flying. They're great for disrupting enemy humans and general crowd control more than the other myth units in this age, which focus down units one at a time. Moving up to the Mythic Age though, the first is Shinigami. They're pretty squishy for a late game unit at just 300 HP and relatively low armor, though these guys have not just a very powerful lightning attack, but also open the fight with a terrifying shout that sends enemy units in front running. That's their main way to not take melee damage, and then follow it up with an area of effect high damage range attack. Another interesting feature is they have a second life, so if you lose one in combat, you just need to jump back to your temple where you'll find he's back and more blue than ever, ready to fight for a second time, after which if you lose them, then they really are gone for good. The second myth unit for the Mythic Age is Omaraki. Flying has a lot of advantages, and his armor is pretty good as well, but the main benefit of this unit isn't just what it can do, attacking directly from the skies, but the fact it temporarily summons units called wretches to fight on the ground, giving you free extra soldiers to soak up damage and adding more DPS to the mix. The final Mythic Age option is Asura. Like the Oni, this is your super slow but tanky giant, in this case with an extra ability of automatically shooting fireballs from two of his hands, either directed at whatever he's attacking or with a bit of range in between fighting enemies. He gives you the combo of tankiness, high damage, and some ranged and area effect, which is a pretty strong combo. Just to briefly cover your other two myth units of the dock, the first is the Honengyo, which have a useful ability to submerge and then re-emerge to attack an enemy and send enemy ships flying. This lets them bypass melee ships to get in range of squishier ones behind without taking too many shots. The other myth unit is the Umibozu, which I just think is the coolest looking myth unit in the game, straight up. These guys do a way crazier version of the submergibility by just outright teleporting on the map from any location in the water to any other. They just appear and start fighting, and they'll use this ability completely on their own to jump around a fight, meaning despite being very slow when walking, you can't really escape them. So that's the Japanese myth units, and now let's get back to what makes Age of Mythology feel completely unique with their god powers. The major god powers in the Archaic Age again were the protective shield from Amaterasu, making a single unit invulnerable for a short period of time, Tsukuyomi letting you research all text available at a building nearly instantly, and Susanoo giving you a small area disruption spell. These are all pretty tame compared to some of the later god powers. To start in Classical Age with the first round of minor gods, the first is the Shrine of the Hunt. This doubles down on your shrines by giving free wolves and deer around one of them. Not only do the wolves protect a bit from early raids, but you get free deer as either a nice food boost, or you can just leave them and it'll power up the favorite generation of the shrine, as animals increase that production as long as they stand close enough. The second god power is Goshinboku, which plops down a tree that will revive your myth units. This comes with the minor god who unlocks your weasels of unusual size. And the way it works is when any of your myth units die, their little green soul travels back to the tree and enters a queue, where after a bit of a delay, they'll come back as fresh units. The queue maxes out at 2, so it's not going to save every unit you lose in the game, but is helpful after an early raid and will essentially keep a steady supply of free myth units popping out over time as you fight. Value-wise, this is probably the strongest god power in Classical Age at the moment, certainly in the long run. The third power is Swampland, which gives you an area on the map that over 30 seconds will just randomly grab enemy human units and pull them under with a little terrifying scream, never to be heard from again. A smart player will try to get out of it as quickly as possible, but it's still very disruptive, and even over a few seconds they will lose some units, with boxed in enemies or units trying to push their way through being almost wiped out entirely. There's just a creepiness factor, making this one extra memorable, as units just get picked off one by one. Moving on to the Heroic Age powers next, the first is Shogun, which just turns one of your hero daimyos at the stable into a samurai generating factory. They only generate while they're fighting, but every once in a while they'll just pop a fully formed samurai into existence, I assume through the process of reproductive budding, or by some other method unknown to science. Obviously, it's very important to keep that special daimyo alive to maximize its value with this god power, and the fact he has to be in combat to use it makes it somewhat of a high-risk play. The second Heroic Age power is Thunderburst, which is just your classic area disruption, knocking units in the air and doing a bit of damage. The whole ground just periodically turns into a big trampoline, toppling trees and making it very hard for any non-flying enemy units to do anything productive during those 15 seconds. The fact it grows with each bounce also means it's almost impossible to get out of once they're in it, so enemy units just have to enjoy the ride. The third power is Smiting Gust, which does very little damage outright, but you point it in a direction and units caught up in it will just go absolutely flying. However far you expect them to go, they just seem to go a lot further. You have to watch out a bit with this one, as it hits your own units as well, though note it only works on military units, so you can't blow their farmers and lumberjacks a quarter way across the map and force your opponent to resort them all. And finally, for the top tier mythic age powers, the first is Sacred Gate, which makes all future recast god powers 15% cheaper, but also gives you an extra use of all of the ones you have for free again, so it's like getting 3 god powers a second time instead of a final new one. Plus, you can continue to recast them cheaper after that. Another option is Divine Slash, which is just your classic heavy damage on a single area, taking out buildings, human units, or softening up myth units that are a bit too bunched up. The third option is Dragon Typhoon, as your standard mass damage god power to hit someone's base, or a way to clear out a bunch of weak units. Most pantheons get something equivalent to this, and is just a classic motif for late game god power. And finally, to wrap up, we have their Titan, a giant 8-headed dragon. This is the smaller form of it, but even this is plenty, sending units flying with a powered up attack and using a tail whip to do area damage in between charges. That'll do it though for this quick introduction to the Japanese. To me, they feel like they have more variety of myth units than Chinese personally, and the shrine mechanic is certainly very unique. The 3 major gods are then pretty intuitive with how they're set up to be played, and the dojo in particular gives you a couple of pretty interesting units to experiment with. I feel like the devs did a good job with this pantheon, and it's a unique but not overpowered feeling civilization is my early impression. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.